We have new Final Fantasy 16 info and some early impressions. This comes from, I don't know, Twitter Roundup. We got a bunch of
Yeah.
people. This specific tweet comes from at Rhino the Bouncer saying, we have new Final Fantasy 16 info. Stories like 35 hours. It's a dark RPG with great action, semi-open world, unique characters with their own stories, 11 plus hours of cinematics, no loading, 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second mode. I assume that's graphics and performance.
Yep.
There's a demo plan around 2 weeks before the launch, and there's supposed to be seamless game to cinematic transition.
This is big. We had a bunch
Huge.
of gaming journalists fly out to Japan to get their hands on with the game, and they were able to tell about almost everything that they played. They were able to play a couple hours worth of the game that was focused mainly on combat. And they said the story was like parsed a little thin because they really wanted to put them in a bunch of different scenarios where they'd be using all their abilities and stuff. But everybody has really positive things to say about this. Yeah, as a great jumping on point for new Final Fantasy players. It's a story you don't have to be familiar with anything else to do. The combat is comparative to a lot of other games. They're really focusing on the story, and just I'm very excited for Final Fantasy 16, dude. Everything I'm seeing about it is like so exciting.
Yeah, I've heard comparisons like this one has Jeff Grubb comparing the combat to Devil May Cry meets God of War. Polygon said the whole game is like Devil May Cry meets like Game of Thrones, which is really crazy,
yeah.
and talking about the game's politics and like how character relations are going to be. It's just shaping up to be a really solid experience for new and returning Final Fantasy players. I've seen some pushback on the 11 plus hours of cinematics, and then I saw Gene Park tweet out like, hold your horses, everyone. Red Dead Redemption 2 had like 20 hours of cinematics.
Yeah, who cares, dude? I'll be watching these.
Yeah, calm down. But I think like the story at 35 hours is a great, like, that's like the perfect sweet spot of not too long. I love the fact that it's a semi-open world where you have, I think that kind of, I think of God of War when I hear that, because you are going through linear sections, but then you also have moments when you can go out and explore, but for the most part, it's taking you along.
I think that a semi-open world is much not easier to do than an open world, but more focused than an open world. Whereas an open world, they have to tell you to go.
I think it is easier to do.
Yeah, but the semi.
I think it is like it's easier to succeed. I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I think open world has like, it's so much harder to actually succeed in.
Yeah.
Because it just has such a big scope and it's really hard to do. So when developers do it right, it's really great. But I think it's a different type of game experience entirely than a story-driven game like a Final Fantasy 16 or God of War or any of these other games with like semi-open worlds. They lose focus.
Right. Yeah. One other thing that was hugely noted within all of the stuff that we've seen so far is kaiju battles, in which you play as Clive, which is still such a funny name to me to have your Final Fantasy 16 character. But he can turn into one of the gods, which is an Icon. I think that's what they call him. Icon. And so it's Icon versus Icon, and you become it, and it just looks insane, the scale of it. They released like maybe 30 seconds of what that gameplay looks like, and it looks nuts. I am very excited to do that as well.
I'm very, very excited for the kaiju battles.
I mean, in the gameplay, we're seeing like full-size scale like wars here. Like, it just looks really good. Everything I've seen.
There's a lot of scale to this game in terms of like what you're actually doing within the narrative sense, like the bigger things. It just feels very big, and not in a way that I think we've seen in a really long time. I think where you've seen scale in terms of like, we're gonna make a game world that's like that big and you can go here and do there, but like we haven't seen scale in focused encounters where like whole like big scale engagements where you're a small part of a very big thing going on.
Right. It's so exciting. This is also new news, is that, well, we already knew it was going to be a PlayStation exclusive, but it sounds like it will be exclusive to PlayStation for 6 months, and then it will come to PC and Xbox. And then there was more details on how it was built specifically for PlayStation, and then will be ported to PC and Xbox instead of usually made for PC ported to PlayStation, and Xbox, that sort of thing. So that's exciting if you have a PlayStation 5. I don't believe this is coming to PlayStation 4. I think you have to have a PlayStation 5 to play it. I'm almost certain. So
I'm glad we're there, to be honest.
I'm glad we're there, too.
We're finally at the hardware cutoff.
It is, it's getting there. That's pretty much all we have on Final Fantasy 16. There's tons of gameplay that you can go check out if you would like to watch it, or if you're kind of like me, I don't really want to see too much. I want to see a little bit to get excited, but I don't want to see everything yet. The game will launch sometime in the summer, I believe. Yeah, and if you want to know everything else about Final Fantasy 16, you can stay right here at Strictly Casual. If you want to listen to this entire podcast episode, you can go on audio platforms and type in Strictly Casual Checkpoint. This is episode 151. Or you can become a member and watch the entire podcast here on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.